Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano. Today's the 10th of August, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So Base is officially live. Well, as of yesterday, August 9th, it is officially live. Obviously, it has been kind of unofficially live for about a week and a half now, maybe a little bit longer than that. We saw all the craziness with the bold meme token and things like that, but now that it's open for everyone, and I guess like Base has their on-chain summer initiative ongoing here, a lot of people have been bridging in. A lot of people have been minting these NFTs on there. You can go to this website, onchainsummer.xyz, and mint these NFTs. You can mint the Base Day 1 NFT. I think there is, you still got 21 days to mint this, I think. So you can go check that out for yourself. There is, from my, I guess, from what I can tell, like most of the popular apps are already live on Base. It's actually pretty amazing how quickly everything got deployed to Base. And I say it's amazing, but at the same time, it's not surprising because a lot of these apps, are pretty easily portable, right? Because they're all built for the EVM. They're all built in Solidity already, so they can just quickly be ported from Ethereum layer 1 or another or a different EVM kind of compatible or equivalent layer 2 straight to Base. And that really is the superpower of these EVM L2s, right? In that it's kind of like we had the EVM L1s like Fantom and the Avalanche C chain back in 2021, and BSC, of course, Binance Smart Chain, where essentially the things could be forked on or just redeployed on these networks very easily. Well, now we can do it with L2s, and as we all know, with L2s, it's obviously the end game for the L2s is for them to be much more secure and much more decentralized than these kind of like alternative L1s or side chains. So developers are quick to deploy there. People are quick to jump on there. They're quick to bridge from Ethereum, and they get to benefit from those obviously cheaper fees and faster transactions. Now, the thing about the fees is always a funny thing because sometimes people will say, oh, the L2 fees, they're still pretty expensive. They're not as cheap as they as they can be. Sometimes you'll pay like 10, 20 cents for a swap or something like that. It's like, yeah, okay. Like obviously, when I say cheap, I mean relative to Ethereum layer 1, right? But obviously, they're not the cheapest fees around. But post EIP 4844, they're going to get considerably cheaper. And then even after that, when we do things like increase the L1 gas limit when we have statelessness and Verkle trees and stuff like that. Also, the L2s themselves getting cheaper to use over time by using compression techniques for different things and just becoming overall cheaper themselves. We're not relying on just the L1 here. The fees are definitely going to be sub-cent for quite a while. And it's kind of funny because there's two distinct different constructions of an L2, right? There is a full rollup where you post all the data to Ethereum and you post the proof to Ethereum. So basically, I mean, you don't have to post it to Ethereum, but essentially the way I define it is that you post both the data and the proof, and you have the bridge that lives on the one settlement layer, right? The one settlement layer in this case is Ethereum L1, whereas you have the other construction of an L2, which is, I guess, commonly known as a Validium, where data is actually stored off-chain and the proof and the bridge is basically on-chain, which obviously doesn't give you as much security as a roll-up, but it gives you, I guess, like cheaper fees because the data is the most expensive portion. It's like 90% of the fees or something like that. So in that world, though, it's still cool because essentially you can create a hybrid. So there's those two distinct kind of constructions under the L2 umbrella, but then you can create a hybrid where essentially you have something that can be a Validium or a rollup depending on what the user wants to do. So they can store their data on Ethereum L1 if they want to. They just pay the fee to do that, right? They pay the extra fee to do that. So in that world, what does it look like? What's going to be a rollup? What's going to be a Validium? Well, from the way I see it is that everything of high value is going to be full rollup, like things like DeFi, of course, like high value NFT stuff like that. They're going to be on rollups, but the low value stuff like low value NFTs, gaming, the social apps, stuff like that, it doesn't make much sense for them to be expensive and to put their kind of like data on Ethereum L1 for that L1 security because they don't need it really. I mean, it's lower value stuff. It's definitely something that that can deal with that security trade off there, and that's the beautiful thing about this, right? You get to kind of like choose your own adventure here Because in my mind, what I think should happen is that the Validium should always be a hybrid where it's like a default of Validium. So by default, it posts all the data off chain, but then it gives the users the ability to post that data wherever they want. Really, I mean, I say off chain, but I mean like off the same settlement layer. But giving the users the option to be able to say, no, you know what, I want to post the data to Ethereum L1, or I want to store the data myself, or I want to post it to some other data availability layer, or I want to post it in multiple places. That is the end game for me, because that means that the users, and not just like the individual users, but the actual companies using the chains, the entities using the chains, different enterprises, stuff like that, get to choose what happens to that data, where they store it, what their costs are, and it gives more flexibility for things here. So yeah, that's super exciting in my mind, at least around that. But yeah, if you haven't bridged into Base yet, be sure to do so. You can mint this NFT, as I said, this day one NFT. Obviously, you have to switch to Base to do that. I'm currently on mainnet apparently. So yeah, you can go check that out for yourself. And Jesse Pollack, the lead behind the Base initiative at Coinbase, has tweeted out today a picture of Google Trends, and you can see here that the term on-chain, so on-chain one word, not with a dash, has been trending up over the past few months here, and has actually shot up recently. And of course, that's because he's been memeing it on Twitter, and everyone's been talking about on-chain summer, right? On-chain this, on-chain that, and it's obviously trying to be the new online. You know, we don't type online with on dash line. So with on-chain, he wants to make it just one word, and I think it's a good meme, honestly. So great to see the uptick there for sure. But as I said, you can go check out Base for yourself. It is now officially live for everyone. All right, speaking of L2s, it seems that another, I guess, like Alt L1 is going to become an L2. So this time it is Fantom. Now, I mentioned Fantom before. It is an EVM kind of compatible L1. It basically does the same thing as Ethereum, as any other EVM chain. And these are the chains that I remember I did say to you guys I thought had the highest chance of becoming an L2, because they really don't do anything different. They don't try to do anything different. They're not unique architectures. They might have like unique consensus mechanisms, but that's not really, in my mind, something to something that that is a big deal, that is that important. But on the flip side of things, I can't help but think that Fantom is doing this because it's desperation. Because you guys know that recently Fantom's biggest bridge was, I don't think it was hacked. It was a weird story about how there was a multi-sig controlling it, and then the guy controlling it got arrested, and then the keys were handed to his sister or something, and then she ran off with the funds. So there was some stuff going on, some dodgy stuff going on there. The FTM price has obviously tanked. All the activity on Fantom is down a lot. So it screams desperation to me, and that's why I've said before, and I actually put a tweet out about this here, where I basically said a layer 1 becoming an Ethereum L2 is cool and all, but it doesn't mean that it automatically finds product market fit. Many L2 networks will end up being ghost towns. In any case, Ethereum still wins by cementing itself as the global settlement layer for all types of value. And I stand by this wholeheartedly. And I have talked about this a lot on the refill before, where L1, L2 sidechain, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day when it comes to product market fit, right? The market and people are going to choose what they want to use. They're going to choose what they find valuable, and they're going to be willing to spend money on things that they want to use. So just because you're an L1 that's become an L2 doesn't automatically give you product market fit. Maybe it marginally increases your chances of success, but in Fantom's case, for example, what does Fantom have going for it over the other L2s that are already EVM compatible? Like, what does it have over Arbitrum One and OP Mainnet and Base, right? It doesn't. In my mind, it doesn't bring anything unique to the table. It is the same thing as those other chains out there. And I've said before that I don't think we're going to have many of those generalized EVM chains be successful. I really only think there's going to be a handful of them that have the majority of the activity. And even then, that's a stretch. Having 5 of them over the long term, yeah, it remains to be seen. But I don't know. I'm not convinced. So yeah, it just doesn't really make much sense to me, because in my mind, from what I've seen from Fantom, it doesn't have a unique value prop over these other things. But as I said in the tweet as well, it's still positive for Ethereum, because it basically just, it confirms the thesis that a lot of us in the Ethereum ecosystem have been saying for quite a while, that L1s should just become L2s. But at the same time, like, these L1s, as I said, these L1s becoming L2s, it doesn't really give them product market fit automatically. And in saying that, it also doesn't mean that if you create an L2, like a new L2, it's brand new, you'll find product market fit because it's an L2 instead of an L1. No, not at all, right? The vast majority of other L1s, pretty much all of them have failed, right? Completely failed over the years. And it's been like 10 years of these things, right? So it's naive to think that just because something is an L2 means that its chances of success go, way, way up. No, in my mind, it doesn't really. I think that of the generalized ones, as I said, there's going to be a handful of really successful winners. They have a better chance than L1s for reasons I've outlined in the past. I won't rehash them now. I mean, just a quick rehash for people who may have forgotten. Things like obviously being in the Ethereum ecosystem, getting the Ethereum community support, liquidity, bridging in from Ethereum mainnet there to these L2s, having a better narrative, stuff like that, right? That all counts, and obviously having a better developer experience and things like that. I think that all definitely counts. In this scenario, so yeah, I think the main point here is like not to get sucked in, not to think that just because something's an L2 means it's going to have like instant success. And I think it's kind of a funny thing because there was in 2020 during DeFi summer, every project started kind of like calling itself DeFi, right? And wanting to be DeFi and wanting to do yield farming and all this sorts of stuff. And it didn't mean that product found product market fit. What happened was that it may have gotten a bit of traction because it was, the market was heating up again. There was yield farming going on. There was liquidity incentives. But then when that stuff dried up, a lot of those projects ended up failing. And there's a ton of dead DeFi projects from that people considered huge back then. Right, and I think the quintessential example is something like SushiSwap, right? Which was at one point very big as Uniswap, if not bigger, I think, at one point. But this was like the peak of SushiSwap's usage. And then over the years, for one reason or another, it kind of got, I guess, like out of favor. They didn't iterate on their roadmap. People left the team. Like one of the original people outside of Chef Nomi, 0x Mackie ended up leaving. And yeah, it just didn't really eventuate into anything. But that's just the top example. There's plenty of other examples out there. So I think the same thing's going to happen to these L2s, especially if we get an L2 summer, like I've kind of talked about a lot on the Refuel and put tweets out about it. But generally, I think I'm going to stick by this opinion for the foreseeable future. That doesn't really make much sense to me just because something becomes an L2 for it to automatically get product market fit. Now, I also came across this little meme bingo card that Bread put together on Twitter today. He said, with Fantom exploring becoming an L2, just like Cello did, I thought I'd make a bingo card for L1s for easier migration tracking. Mostly a joke, but wouldn't be surprised to see this hit. The criteria was the L1s have to be outside of the top 20 by market cap and no obvious personality at the top. This actually is pretty in line with the criteria I would have chosen. As I've said before, I think that the L1s that have kind of an obvious personality or like founders that have huge egos that are very kind of noisy on Twitter and other places, those are definitely not going to transition to an L2 anytime soon in my mind. It just doesn't make sense for a bunch of different reasons. And then outside the top 20 makes sense as well because a lot of the L1s in the top 20 are actually ones that would make absolutely zero sense to become an L2 because what they're trying to do as an L1 doesn't really work as an L2. And I've talked about these before. Something like Cardano, right? They've got the unique architecture that they want to focus on, even if it's crap, right? They've got this unique architecture that they want to focus on. They're not going to become an L2 for that reason, but also Charles Hoskinson is never going to do that, right? That's just never going to happen. Solana, same deal, where they've basically got an architecture that they like, that they want to keep iterating on, and it technically maybe in some kind of way could work with Ethereum L1 and as an L2, but I don't think that they would kind of do that there. And then I mean you can go through the list here. Polkadot, same deal. Tron, Tron is in the top 20. Tron could actually become an L2 relatively easily because it's just an EVM chain. And Tron is actually one of the EVM chains that has usage, or any EVM L1s that has usage, especially with stablecoins, because it's very cheap for people to use it for stablecoins. It has deep integrations with exchanges and stuff like that. So I could see that happening. But again, Justin Sun does have a bit of an ego to him. Maybe he does it because he thinks it's going to make him more money. He thinks it's going to make the TRX price go up. I don't know, remains to be seen. But the ones on Bread's kind of bingo card here, I mean, most of these are just failed L1s, right? I mean, he's even got Neo here. Like, Neo's completely dead. EOS is completely dead, right? Flow seems completely dead as well. Like, a lot of the Qtum, ETH Classic. Could you imagine if ETH Classic became an L2 on Ethereum? That would be like the most poetic outcome, I think. It's just like the full circle. But yeah, I don't think the whole kind of thing card here is going to be hit. There's a lot of them here that are definitely not going to transition. And again, them transitioning is not really going to do anything for them. I think that they definitely are already dead and are going to stay dead for all the different reasons that I've outlined in the past there. But just a cool little fun bingo card that Bread put together here and actually tagged me, and that's why I saw it. So cheers there to Bread. All right, moving on from the L2 stuff. Actually, I'm going to talk more about the L2 stuff at the end of the refill. I've got L2 beat up for that, but I just want to quickly talk about these other things. So, Fluent is a new project that I saw was introduced today on Twitter, and they're introducing something called the zkWASM execution layer for Ethereum. They say here, rollups unlock abundant block space, but less than 1% of developers can access it. Fluent offers devs the freedom to build in any language, such as Rust, Go, Solidity, etc. on Ethereum. So this is pretty cool. This is definitely very similar to what Arbitrum is doing with their Stylus initiative, making it so that anyone can program smart contracts for the EVM in kind of any language that they want to. And it seems like Fluent is also taking this kind of philosophy on board and building out this as a general purpose zkWASM execution layer. So they say here that Fluent blends together three key innovations: zk rollup to relieve app performance and cost constraints, WebAssembly VM to support languages like Rust, TypeScript, Go, and more, and EVM tooling compatibility to enable Solidity, MetaMask support, account abstraction, etc. So yeah, this is pretty cool. I think that WASM was actually something that was on the Ethereum roadmap for quite a while. It was depending on how familiar you are with like the Ethereum roadmap from over the years, there was once upon a time an idea as part of the execution sharding Ethereum roadmap. So this is the original sharding roadmap, to have different shards be responsible for or have different shards have different architectures. And you could have one shard that was EVM, you could have another shard that was WASM, you could have another shard that was something else, right? But obviously that idea has been abandoned, and now instead of shards we have L2s, which work a lot better than execution shards out there. So Instead of execution sharding, we have data sharding coming, but then we push the execution to the L2s, which, as the Ethereum ecosystem believes, is a much better solution here. So Fluent is basically, I guess, taking that roadmap item, which was WASM as an execution environment on Ethereum, and making a layer 2 for it. So very, very cool to see this. Cool to see something different. I mean, you guys know that I always like seeing things different when it comes to the L2 space, especially as I said before. I don't believe there's going to be, a lot of the generalized EVMs aren't going to be very successful because of the fact that it just doesn't make much sense from a distribution perspective. So Fluent here trying something different is to be applauded. But I'll link their Twitter thread in the YouTube description below for you to check out. All right, so I came across this new project on this new initiative called the Autonomous Worlds Network on Twitter. So they describe this by saying autonomous worlds are not just worlds that happen to exist on chain, but worlds that could not exist otherwise. So they've announced this network, which is a 0x Park organization that seeks to uncover and advance the plot of these worlds. So I've talked about this before, autonomous worlds, and how a lot of work has been done on this in the Starknet ecosystem. And I have mentioned before about how it's not just about bringing these kind of like on-chain worlds and kind of like gaming systems, these worlds and gaming systems on chain, but it's about creating things that can only exist on chain. So if that interests you, if that's something that has piqued your interest, you can go check out the website for yourself. There's a bit more information here, and you can inquire by emailing here, and you can also follow their Twitter accounts. But I really do think that there's something here. I do think that there are unique applications that can be enabled by blockchains outside of the usual kind of stuff like DeFi and just general finance stuff, and obviously things like ENS and potentially social media and decentralized social media, stuff like that. when it comes to gaming, I think that the most interesting thing to me is this autonomous world stuff, because a lot of games traditionally have just been slapping blockchain onto the game and trying to like fit it in. Whereas I like seeing stuff be built from the ground up to use the blockchain technology that we have and the crypto technology that we have, including zero knowledge proofs and stuff like that, to build things that just are not possible using a centralized database, for example, just using the existing infrastructure that people use to build games. So if that interests you, you can go check out this tweet, this Twitter thread. I will link this in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, now I was talking about L2s a lot before, but I figured that I wanted to really dive a bit deeper into L2s today on the refuel, because they are definitely the main narrative right now. I mean, I'm seeing L2s talked about absolutely everywhere, and it's not just obviously the optimistic rollup stuff and the base stuff, but like the zk rollups. It's got to do with L1s becoming L2s. It's got to do with the security of these things. You know, there's lots of FUD around L2s as well. People saying that L2s are just bridges and they're not as secure as Ethereum people are saying it, blah, blah, right? With popularity comes FUD, and we're all used to that. But what I wanted to highlight on the L2 Beat website, once again, I've highlighted this before, but I wanted to highlight this pizza kind of like pie chart, or people are calling it a pizza because it looks like pizza slices here, which shows the risks of each of these L2s. There does not exist something like this for L1s. And the reason why it doesn't is because there isn't an initiative that sits on top of the kind of like L1s, or there isn't like a party that is aligned with all the L1s to create something like this. Whereas when it comes to L2s, the people who are motivated to create and maintain something like L2 Beat are doing it because they're in the Ethereum ecosystem. They are Ethereans, and they understand that L2s are the way Ethereum is going to scale and are part of the Ethereum ecosystem. So from that social side of things, that's why L2 Beat exists, and not only why it exists, but why it is so incredibly valuable. Because on here, you actually get these risk disclaimers, and it actually shows you exactly what's going on these L2s, what risks you're taking, you know, how centralized they are right now, and links to, and if you click in, there is a wealth of information here. Like, it is actually insane how much information there is here. You do not get this for L1s. There are some websites out there like Masari that give you some information, but it's nothing like this. It's not technical. Look at this. You don't see this. Like, look at this diagram here, this flowchart. This is insane, right? I know it can be a little bit confusing, but all this information is here for you. It's links to different smart contracts, controlling things. Like, this is just absolutely insane to me, and I love that L2 Beat exists. I should disclose here that I actually am an investor in L2 Beat, and the reason I invested in them was because I wanted this to be built, right? I wanted this to be built and maintained, and for them to continue to be able to put this information out there, because it is so valuable. And what it also does, and what excites me, is that it increases the competition between the L2s to fill out this pie. Because obviously, if you're pie or pizza, obviously if you have all red pizza slices here, or the majority red, you know, people are going to point that out, or you're going to see that, and maybe it's going to be a sense of dishonor for you, right? Where you're just like, oh my god, my L2 doesn't look as good as it can. I've got red everywhere. I need to turn those yellow and then green. And you can see here that Arbitrum is pretty far along. They've got 3 green and 2 yellow, but then you go to OP Mainnet, they've only got 2 green and 3 red, because they don't have, I guess, like fraud proofs enabled yet or anything like that, whereas Arbitrum is further along. And then you can see here DYDX is actually the most far along, where they've got 4 green and 1 yellow here, which is pretty cool to see. And when you've got this breakdown like this, as I said, it encourages teams to fill this out and make it all green, and to advance through the stages of decentralization for a roll-up. So no one is at stage 2 right now except Fuel V1, but Fuel V1's actually filled out the whole pie here, but no one uses Fuel V1, so I mean, it's got a TVL of $500. So when you look at it like that, it doesn't really matter. But there, you know, there's also D-Gates, which has it all green as well. But again, $2 million TVL, not that much. But if you were to look at the ones that have the most TVL, they're not full green yet, but they are getting there. And one day you're going to see that they're all going to be full green. Like Arbitrum 1, OP Mainnet, ZK Sync, all of them here are going to be full green. They're going to be at stage 2. And the only reason you'll really be able to track that and know that is because of L2 Beat. So I really do applaud the team for this, and keeping it up to date is really the the crux of it, because this resource could be created and then just left to die, right? Like if there's no one to update it, no one to contribute to it, no one to make sure that all the information is accurate, it could be just left there, and then it gets outdated, and the information is just bad. But it's not. It's updated. They update it pretty quickly as well. They add new L2s very quickly. So it's just, yeah, I don't know. I'm gushing over them, but it's really great to see here. And not only do they have kind of like these risk trackers and stuff like that, but they also have a risk analysis page here where you can kind of view at a glance what which risks each L2 has, and they've also got the activity tab here where they track the various activity on the various L2s. There's also another website for tracking activity that I've highlighted on the refuel before, but I want to highlight them again and give them another shout out, which is GrowThePie.xyz. So this website has a bunch of I guess like additional metrics that L2 Beat doesn't have right now on the L2s and their activity, stuff like obviously active addresses, transactions, all that sorts of stuff. And you can kind of go on the left-hand side here and explore each of these. You've got Ethereum Layer 1, you've got Arbitrum, a bunch of them here, and yeah, they've got a bunch of nice dashboards and charts and everything for you to look at. And there is also stats and metrics on Dune Analytics. There's various dashboards there as well. But yeah, this is all coming together very nicely, and it's great to see that we can actually track all of this stuff, because at the end of the day, it's all well and good for everyone to be saying, yeah, L2s are getting traction, everyone's using the L2s, there's so much going on L2s, you should go there. But what we need is for users to be able to see on here on L2 Beat, for example, see the risks, see what risks they're taking on by bridging in, see what would happen in a worst case scenario, be able to ask what would happen in a worst case scenario, and see how these L2s are evolving over time, but also for them to track the activity on these different things, to see what's going on in them, to see which ones have the most activity and that sort of stuff there. So yeah, definitely just wanted to give a huge kind of shout out to L2 Beat and also GrowThePie for basically creating these really awesome websites. And you should definitely go check both of them out, which I'll link in the YouTube description below for you to do so, of course. And the last thing, actually, before I wrap up today's episode on the L2 front, it's kind of funny to read people's comments about kind of speculating on the L2s and like what tokens they think they should buy and how long they should hold them for, etc., etc. I'm not going to tell you what tokens to buy. I'm not going to tell you how long to hold them. I'm not going to give you any advice like that. The one thing I do want to say, based on a lot of the conversations that I've seen happening, especially in the Daily Gwei Discord channel, which you should join, by the way, link in the description, is that a lot of these tokens need to be looked at not so much in a vacuum, but you need to look at them kind of in comparison to each other, because when you look at them compared to each other, they all have different distributions. They all have different allocations as well. So different distributions in terms of like when the tokens actually come out to market or when they get hit market. Different allocations. So how much do investors get? How much does the team get? How much does the community get? Etc. etc. Some of them have initiatives like Optimism has the retroactive public goods funding, where they give out, I think it's like $40 million of OP or something like that, $30 million of OP as part of every round, which is about 20 million OP or something, something crazy like that. So that's also a factor there. But generally also being aware of the fact that we are currently in a bear market, and it's likely that all of these things are just going to go up in a bull market based on narrative alone. They're going to go up against US dollars, but don't let that fool you into thinking that any of these things are going to hold long-term value, because things will get crazy. And I just, I wanted to kind of put that out there, because I know that people are going to be speculating on these things in a really crazy way, especially like for base, for example. People were buying OP up to the leading up to the base launch, because there's no base token, right? And I'm sure people are going to still buy OP when the market heats up again, because there's going to be a narrative that OP is the token for base, because base doesn't have a token and base is built using OP's technology, right? So there's always competing narratives going to be going on, but best to keep your head on when listening to those sorts of things. View the L2 tokens the same way you will view any token, really. You just look at them the same way as any other token, do the same risk analysis on them, do the same kind of investment analysis on them, and decide if it's something that you think you want to allocate your money to. And actually on that note as well, last thing, I promise, with value accrual for these tokens, I get this question. This question gets asked a lot in the Discord channel again, but also personally, I get it all the time from people. My answer really is that there's really only two big, or I guess significant, value accrual drivers for L2 tokens. It's used as a staking token and it's used as a governance token. Now, when I say staking token, I mean that it's probably most likely that these L2s are going to decentralize their validation and sequencing and proving as well in terms of ZK rollups by allowing users to stake the token and then earn a portion of the fee revenue of the L2 as a reward, and obviously any MEV as well. And then obviously governance is self-explanatory as to why that would be a value driver there. But outside of that, there's not really much else, guys, because the L2 tokens are not going to be stores of value. They're not going to be money. They're going to be used as collateral, but it's not going to be something like an ETH, right? And so when you look at the value accrual pillars, it really just comes down to staking and governance, and that's not bearish because if the most successful L2 out there will probably have heaps of fee revenue, right? Potentially millions, if not tens of millions of dollars a day in the long term. And if you're staking and getting a share of that, then that could be a really nice yield. And it could also just not just be the fees. It could be like some tail inflation that they do on the token in order to pay people to stake. I don't know. It depends on the L2, depends what they want to do. But as I've said before, and as I'll repeat again today, not all L2s are created equal. So definitely keep that in mind when looking at these things from any number of perspectives. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.